We are concerned that unless the root cause is determined, this could happen again. We know this plane had problems prior to this day, right? We know there is a history of issues here. I am convinced that there are problems on this aircraft. I am convinced that there are electrical vulnerabilities. If we prove that, we will definitely file lawsuits. Air India has not paid every single family. All of the
What
claims,
they say.
we've seen releases that Air India has tried to get families to sign that would release Boeing.
Hello and welcome to The Print. We're being joined by Mike Andrews. He is the lawyer for the victims of the AI171 crash. It's going to be one full year, and Mike, we're still as unaware as we were a few months ago that we last spoke. There is a preliminary report that's come out, and then there has been a lot of speculation, a lot of hearsay from the Indian agencies, from UKAIB, but we have not heard anything concrete from anyone as of now. Where do you think the investigation stands as of now?
Well, I can tell you that our investigation has continued daily. Although you, I, the rest of the world have waited for more definitive information from the AAIB, we have continued our investigation behind the scenes in a number of ways. We've continued to uncover and explore technical documents, wiring diagrams, hydraulic schematics, logic information for the 787 to understand the interplay between all of these complex systems. We've categorically looked at each symptom of failure on this plane and then tried to establish what are the reasons that these things can occur. For example, we know that the RAT device, the auxiliary power unit, is out and deployed very, very early while the plane is still on the runway prior to rotate. That's important for a number of reasons. It's important because it's a symptom of something that has called for the RAT to deploy, but it's also important if you look at the timeline because the RAT appears to be out significantly prior to any mention of this transition of fuel switches, which is completely contrary to the narrative involving suicide or pilot intentional conduct. And so we've looked at each of these symptoms, the hydraulics involving the retraction of the landing gear appear to start and then stop as it's beginning to rotate and retract. That's a symptom. The fuel being cut off, probably by a change in the power, the flow of power to the circuits, is a symptom. And so our investigation has continued to look at the technical issues behind each of these symptoms. In addition to that, we've conducted flight simulator testing to understand better what should have happened. And
So, Michael,
because of,
I'm
Mhm.
going to interrupt you right here. You spoke about that you've been conducting your independent investigation. I think it's high time that the world needs answers. The kin of the victim needs answers. So, will you tell us here at the print that what have you found so far?
Sure. So, among other things, we found that we've heard that the transponder for the aircraft may have ceased to work as it is taxiing out, but then restarts sometime later. That's a symptom of a problem. We know there were a number of faults that were recorded and transmitted prior to takeoff. Those are symptoms. We know the rat is out. We know the fuel stops for at some point. We know the hydraulics for the landing gear apparently stop. And so again, in doing some simulator testing, we've looked to see what should you expect. One of the things we've learned is that it appears that the subject flight took longer than expected to actually take off and leave the runway. That's another potential symptom. Is that caused by brake drag? And by that I mean, is there an electrical issue that is causing the brakes to be partially applied and they're cross wired, cross connected? Or is that a symptom of reduced thrust, which again could be an electrical issue? We also know, looking at the RAT issues in the preliminary report, the report seems to indicate that the rat begins producing hydraulic power 4 seconds after it's out and ready to go. That's just not correct. We know that that flies in the face of the technical manuals, of the design intent, and of our testing. that we've looked at ourselves. And so it appears that it should take the rat 14 to 18 seconds or so to begin supplying hydraulic power. Now, if we take the UTC timestamp in the AAIB preliminary report as accurate, if we assume that is an accurate timestamp, that means 14 to 18 seconds prior to that, the rat is out, right? Again, that is consistent with what we see in video and photographic evidence of the plane as it is on the runway. So the question then is, what causes that? And so our focus has always and continues to be on the electrical issues and the logic in this plane. Why is it that you can have a failure of one system and have a cascade of electrical problems that affect all of these systems?
Mike, could it be a FedEx error?
I'm sorry?
Could it have been a FADEC error?
Yeah, that's something that we're looking at. The FADEC, the Full Authority Digital Engine Control, uh, there
Right.
are there are two. There's one for each engine, right? And by design, they are intended to be independent, and they're also supposed to be independent of the power supply. And there's some shielding. Some of the connections through the Common Core network are actually fiber optic connections, which should prevent electrical interference, right? And so again, we've tried to understand how you can have, for example, if you have water going into a power panel on one side of the aircraft, say the P100, 300, or 500 panel, how can that affect panels 400 and 600 on the other side of the plane? Right? How can you have simultaneous failures that seem to originate on one side but propagate to the other side? And so we start looking at what is upstream of that that can cause this. One current issue we're looking at is the potential failure of the central battery system, which could have backfed power. Um, that's an issue we're currently examining.
Let's simplify it for our viewers, Mike. So you're saying that this is most likely an electrical error, but
Yes,
the details of it and what exactly happened is something that you're still investigating.
that's correct.
Mike, there's been a lot of whataboutery, and you do represent the victims of the kin of the victims of the crash, and there's a lot that has happened in the last 1 year. A lot of them have been stranded. A lot of them have been forced out of their homes because their partners passed away, their visas expired. If you can tell me on a human level what is happening with them, they're the ones who are deeply affected. They've lost their family. They've also now lost stability.
Yeah, and that's a huge issue that oftentimes is overlooked. The crash, the day of the crash, while it was the end of the life of the victims, it was the beginning of the suffering for the families. And that suffering continues every single day. Grief is not linear. Some days are good, some days are bad, and that's just the normal grieving process. On top of that, these families have met with resistance from Air India, from areas of where you would expect or hope to see support and assistance. They've instead been met with resistance and reluctance to assist. We know that in some cases, as you said, families have lost income, they've lost their homes, they've lost visas, they've lost access to banking that may exist in the UK for families who are in India because of this red tape system of having to supply probate documents before the banks or regulators will speak with them. And so every single day is a new aspect of suffering and grief for these families in many, many ways.
You spoke of Air India, Mike. Air India sources within the airline tell us that the full and final settlement is done from their side. They've paid each and every victim, they've paid each and every family from their side. Their conscience is clear. But there is an Air India release as well, which speaks about the settlement being full and final. Do you think that's fair?
Well, let me correct you. Air India has not paid every single family. All of the
That's what they
claims,
say. That's what they
yeah,
say.
yeah, all of the claims that are available for the families under the Montreal Convention have not been paid, have not been settled. That is not accurate. And I will tell you that any attempt by Air India or anyone to require a family or a victim to sign a release that is full and final that would affect other parties. For example, we've seen releases that Air India has tried to get families to sign that would release Boeing. That is unconscionable. That is irresponsible, and that should never happen. Why should a family or anyone sign a release to give away rights that they may not know exist yet?
What
Uh, it,
rights are you speaking about, Mike? If you could elaborate a little bit about what particular rights are you speaking about? What rights
specific,
was Air India asking the victims' families to give up?
Specifically rights potentially against Boeing and others for the reasons behind the crash. If it's proven that there's a design problem in this aircraft, if it's proven there's a manufacturing issue in this particular aircraft, and we know this plane had problems prior to this day, right? We know there is a history of issues here. So if those issues are proven to be causal in this crash, these families potentially have the right of recovery against Boeing and others. They should never sign a release to give that up.
How many has are you aware of any families who have indeed signed such a release so far?
We have heard that the early efforts apparently were to target victims who were on the ground, who were injured at the medical college, and they were provided releases to sign that would give up all rights against any entity in the future. We don't have a firm number of how many of those may have signed those early releases. We have certainly counseled our clients not to sign anything that could potentially prejudice their right to recover.
So, Mike, are you alluding that Air India has also tried to cover up for Boeing and other agencies here,
We
and
don't
also
know.
about themselves?
Yeah, we don't know the intent. It's hard to go into someone's mind and speak with authority on intent, right? We can only look at actions and results. And so whether the intent is to cover up and hide, we just don't know.
What about families? What about people who were forced to relocate um, because of what happened to their partners? Have you been able to find find them some solace as of now?
Well, we are, as attorneys, somewhat limited in what we can do in their daily lives of living arrangements, for example. Our job, our role is to help uncover the answers and help hold those accountable for the conduct that caused this. The families are having to go about their day trying to do the best they can.
We'll also speak about the UK investigative agency AAIB. They, of course, have taken it, and they're also experts. But we don't hear from them. We don't. We it's going to be in year as well, and they have a lot of access to a lot of great resources here as well. So why do we not hear something from them? And what exactly can it do for the investigation? And what should be our expectation here?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is the ability of the UK AAIB to have an active role in the investigation. Under the governing Annex 13 for the crash, the country that has a significant number of victims, in this case the UK, has the right to be identified as a quote expert. That's a term of art, or nominate or put forth an expert on behalf of the UK. My understanding is that was done. The expert has certain rights to learn information, to be provided with information, but it is not an absolute. He has the right to request. He has the right to have access to information, but it's not an automatically provided circumstance. And in this case, in which information has been so closely held in India, information has not been released. For example, we know that in December, when I was in India for another set of meetings, members of the Indian Investigation Board were in Washington going through more analysis of either the FDR and or CDR to learn additional information. That has not been shared as far as we know. Now, we do know that information has been sent to the UK experts and the UK AAIB in hopes that it would be shared with India, trying to get as much information as possible back to India. But quite frankly, I think the UK AAIB may be stymied to some extent in the information that they've been provided and what's been shared with them by India.
Are you saying there's a little bit of a communication lag between the two investigative agencies? Because you just told us that there's possibly some information that the UK AIB could also have that they've also not communicated to the Indian agencies, and the same goes for the Indian agency.
I don't think there's information that's held by the UK that's not been transmitted. I think it's the other way around. From what I've seen, it's not a communication lag, it's a communication block in some instances, in which information has not been shared from India to the UK.
There was a lot of chatter about an interim report. There's been a lot of communication and conversation about that there is a possibility that an interim report can come out and a final report may not actually show up. How bad can it get if an irresponsible report comes out? Because the last time that a preliminary report came out, it sort of blamed the pilots, and which led to a lot of backlash as well, and a lot of the Western media that came in and blamed the pilots.
Yeah, and I think we have to take an even broader look at where we are with the reporting process. If the AAIB, if Air India were as convinced in their suicide narrative as they appeared to be in the beginning, there would be no delay in releasing a report. If they know the answer, why are they still searching for an answer? That in and of itself tells us that there's no confidence on their part in this suicide narrative, that they are now doing the same thing we're doing, and that is searching for the true technical issues here. So your question is an excellent question in what could be the potential problems with an irresponsible or incomplete or misleading interim report. That could be very harmful. It could create just as much confusion and as many issues as were seen in the preliminary report. And so careful, methodical, technical analysis is what is required in a case like this. The annex requires that a final report should be provided on or before the 1 year anniversary. If it cannot be, then there should be an interim report. Uh, the question is, how thorough and careful could that report be?
So we need to look out till the 12th if they actually do come up with an interim report, and we can only hope that the damage is not as much as it was when when the preliminary report came out. But
I'll tell you my hope. My hope would be that if there is an interim report, if they are not ready to produce a final, if there is an interim report, and if they feel they have to produce one, that it should be very technical in nature, that it should provide all of the FDR data, and much more of the CVR information than just this decontextualized snippet of conversation regarding why did you switch off. That piece of conversation can refer to so many different issues.
okay, Mike, one final question. Since you've been investigating for a very long time now and you've been connected to the victims on the ground, do you have enough grounds to sue Boeing or Air India now?
That's what we're still trying to uncover. I am convinced that there are problems on this aircraft. I'm convinced that there are electrical vulnerabilities on this aircraft. We know that that's been documented for years through various airworthiness bulletins, directives, and indeed the history of issues prior to this crash on this aircraft. We are still trying to connect those dots to the cause of what happened here. The minute we know and have good confidence of the underlying technical issue that caused this crash, we will be ready for that.
So you're saying that you actually might sue them if it does come to that?
If we prove that, we will definitely file lawsuits.
One final question, but if what you're saying is correct, and if there is actually a problem with the aircraft, that means there are several other Boeing aircrafts which will need to undergo checks. And in the last few months, we've seen several incidences come up. One was also a London Heathrow flight which underwent a fuel control issue, and there was a mayday call on that aircraft, and the flight had to return back. So this is not an isolated event. This is not just one flight that went down. So are you saying that if the oversight is not done properly, this could further cause more problems in the future?
We are concerned that unless the root cause is determined, this could happen again.
This could happen again. So, are you warning that if the root cause is not determined, if the report is not out, if the maintenance checks are not done, this could happen again, and we are nearing a disaster,
Yes.
another disaster yet again.
Yeah, that potential exists. If a disaster of this magnitude occurs and every effort is not taken to uncover the technical background and basis and reason for this crash, then of course this could happen again.
And are you speaking just for India? Are you saying this could happen anywhere across the world, anywhere where there's a Boeing aircraft?
So there are in the engineering failure world, there are manufacturing defects and there are design defects. I think from what we've seen, the 787 plane has suffered from some of both of those. There may be issues that are design related, that would be common to many other aircraft, many other 787, regardless where they are in the world. There may be design specific problems that are unique to each individual aircraft regarding how they were assembled, what their maintenance history may be, if they've had prior fires or other incidents on the plane. And so, again, those are the reasons that you have to do everything possible to learn exactly what happened.
Okay, Mike, thank you so much for speaking to us at the train.